coming in, Trump picks up ground, even by small numbers. You just don't have that many blue counties where Clinton's going to get vote. The places where she could, you see, there just aren't that many votes. She needs big numbers out of where Milwaukee is. She needs big numbers out of Dane. And there is a chance, though, there is a chance when you look at this map, you'd have to say there is a good chance that Donald Trump's able to offset that with all of this red.
We're bringing in Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, right now. Mayor, you on right now?
I am. I'm right here.
So tell me, there's Judy Nathan, your wife. I mean, this is the first time we've seen you two together, so you must be more optimistic than you've been in the past.
Well, we're both very good friends of Donald and Melania, personal friends as well as good friends. So we're very happy for them on a personal basis, and we're very happy for the country. I think this was and I hope it works out. We still have a little ways to go. But if it does happen as it looks that it will, this is a real victory for the people. And Chris, I know you're a historian. This is like Andrew Jackson's victory. This is the people beating the establishment. And that's how he posited it right from the beginning. The people are rising up against a government they find to be dysfunctional. And yes, it's a defeat for the Democrats, but this is a defeat for some Republicans, too.
Okay, it's 1824 again. So how does the new president, if it's your guy, Donald Trump, how does he reunite this country, all ethnic groups that have felt abused, and I think rightfully so, Hispanic people, Islamic people, all kinds of people out there feel that they've been excluded from the Trump future. What's he going to do? What would he do about that to heal that?
I do think if you listen to his speeches over the last 2 months, I don't think a speech went by where he didn't talk about his dedication to truly improving conditions for African Americans, for Hispanics, and for poor people, and for returning the ladder of success that you and I had when we were young, which means a good education and a good job rather than dependency. That was a Jack Kemp candidacy there, really, or a Rudy Giuliani candidacy. And I truly believe that a good education and a good job is a lot better than giving somebody welfare.
Would you like to be part of it?
I like what I'm doing right now, Chris. It's too early for me to think about anything like that.
We got a call to make. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me.
In the state of Georgia, one of the earliest to close, one of the latest to be called, Donald Trump, the projected victor there, 16 electoral votes. A lot of talk that the Democrats would be able to convert that. As you see our chart, 244, 209 in the electoral votes. And down on the board, it is a continued march of Republican red, sweeping the American South. Chris?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you still on? Okay, we lost him. Well, there you go. That map of red is continuous. It's contiguous. It's crossing the country. And I still think this election's up in the air. I still think Pennsylvania is going to decide this thing. What do you got?
This is a change in status for us. Wisconsin, Arizona, too close to call, too close to call.
They had both been too early before.
They had both been too early. Note the percentage of official vote in and note the difference. This is not yet decided.
And we haven't heard really from the usual voices you hear when you're in a very tough situation from a candidate. We're not hearing there are people coming out saying, we still got a good shot. This looks still good for us. We still have a plan. They hadn't had a plan for this time of the evening where they'd have to explain that they could still win.
The Clinton side, you mean?
Yeah, the Clinton side doesn't seem to have a secondary, something behind the front line to say, okay, not what we wanted, but we got a plan to win here. We're not hearing that yet.
What we're down to here with these last calls are New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, and Maine.
Well,
yeah, Steve is.
That's where we're at. That's where we're at. You know, I just think this is one of the most amazing nights in political history. It just is.
Steve, can you show? Are you camera ready? Can you show some of your homework? I see you over there working on combinations.
Yeah, take a look. We had a thing set up here that was supposed to automatically do. I'll do it the old-fashioned way because it's not working here. But take a look at what is still outstanding and what the paths are right now. If you see Trump sitting at 244, okay, Arizona, looking at too close to call there. If Trump wins that, he picks up 11 there. 244 would become 255. Okay. Then you look up here. Now, Maine is one of those states that splits their electoral vote by congressional district. Realistically, the best Trump's getting out of Maine, if he wins that rural district, Bangor, Lewiston, Auburn, all that, he can get 1 out of Maine. He'd sit there at 256. If he wins New Hampshire, you get 4 out of New Hampshire. He'd be sitting there at 260. And then again, you take a look at what's left on this map, and you would need, you would need Wisconsin. Wisconsin would put him over. Wisconsin would put him at 270 at that point.
Jeez.
All right.
The math is getting easier to do. I will say that. I don't have as many numbers in your head.
Katy Tur is just up the block from us after a 510-day Trump campaign. Tonight finds her in the ballroom of the New York Hilton Hotel. Katy, we were just saying the Clinton communications shop has all but shut down. This is a dark side of the moon period for them. They've shut down on social media, in person, surrogates, you name it. What are you learning from there?
Well, the Trump campaign is feeling really good. As quiet as the Clinton campaign is, the Trump campaign is jubilant. Sources tell us that inside Trump Tower right now, headquarters, the war room, if you want to call it that, is described as, quote, crazy. Donald Trump is no longer in that room. He had been there with his top aides, his family, and also his running mate, Governor Mike Pence. But now he is upstairs spending some time with his family as the prospect of him becoming the president of the United States becomes suddenly a little bit more real than it was even earlier today. I can tell you from having crisscrossed this country with him for now 17 or 18 months, what I've seen in almost every city that we have been to, in even some of the bluest states, are people that come out and say that not only are they frustrated with Washington, and not only do they like the fact that Donald Trump is somebody who will tell it like it is, but they want someone to go in and just change things up. Somebody who will throw a bomb in the water, if you will. Somebody who promises that they are going to fix things. Somebody who promises that they are going to get things done. And Donald Trump has done that on the campaign trail almost unequivocally, making grand promises that, frankly, would be very hard to get enacted in a Congress. We'll see if that still remains if he wins tonight in a decisive way. Of course, that is still up in the air, and whether or not the Republicans maintain control of the Senate. We already know that they're going to maintain control of the House. But what I can tell you is that the Trump campaign is feeling vindicated. They feel like they've been talking about a movement, one that most people have overlooked or discredited, and now they're seeing that movement come to fruition. These underrepresented voters that they were not seeing in the polls, these low propensity voters coming out and voting for Donald Trump.
In big numbers across this country. Katy Tur, thanks. Lawrence O'Donnell is with former RNC head Michael Steele and a certain James Carville, who we've been listening to this evening.
That's right. And the conversation never stops here at this table. And James, Wisconsin is looking shaky for Secretary Clinton.
Shaky? Yes, that shaky is about as optimistic a word as I can see right now. I think this is, if this thing goes where it looks like it, where I hope it doesn't go, people got to understand this election is going to have consequences like you can't believe. I was looking with Steve Schmidt's presentation, and I think Steve was, if anything, optimistic. Donald Trump now has the authority of an election behind him. It's the biggest thing that you can have in a democracy. You can't. This is not an antiseptic event. This is now. He has the validation of the people, and he was not very. He said what he was running on. It was pretty clear what he was offering, and obviously you can imagine I'm distraught about the entire thing. I feel terrible for a lot of people, a lot of my friends, but that's what is here tonight is hard to put into perspective. We're going to have one-party rule in this country, and Obamacare is done. Dodd-Frank is done. The diplomatic and financial consequences, I'm looking now, the futures are down 7.19. They're going to go further. It's hard to imagine what this means. And it is no sense in sugarcoating it to people. I think Wisconsin is very problematic. Talking to Chris, and if you just look at what it is, I hate to say it, but I hope, please, God, let me be wrong.
Michael?
Well, look, I have to tell you that Donald Trump set out on a mission. He laid out a vision that connected with a lot of people, a lot of folks around the country. And what was fascinating was it didn't matter the state, as the map showed. Yeah. They used this campaign as a sledgehammer against the established political order in this country, top to bottom. You're right, James. This is a new order here. This is a brand new space for the country and for the American people. Elections have consequences. We all know that. And we're all in this together now. So what is going to be important? If the numbers, if the states bear out the way they seem to be, and he hits with the next 2 or 3 states, hits 270, this is the moment where Donald Trump is, if he's never done it throughout this campaign, this is the moment when he shows the country he's president. And he makes the kind of, I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there, because no matter how you cut this, this is a huge step forward. Now, everybody who gave the talk about Donald Trump wanting to come together around Hillary Clinton and make it work are now going to have to swallow those words and come to Donald Trump and make it work.
Donald Trump did not run to unify the country. No. That was the last thing that he did. The country did not vote to be unified. I mean, I don't mean to be, this was not like a unity and all Americans coming together to be one common people with a vision. This was, there are some people, you know, that are going to do something, you know, this and the other people do that. It's very clear what we voted for. He did not mince words, and I cannot emphasize that enough. He was not a unity candidate. That wasn't what he ran on. He didn't run on a typical Republican agenda.
What is your expectations of governing then?
That we're going to, Obamacare is done. Dodd-Frank is done. Trade agreements are done.
But he said that. So
yeah, I know.
That's what the American people want.
As we hand it back,
not complicated.
As we hand it back to Brian, let me just inject one note here legislatively. Chuck Schumer has just become, or will at the end of this night probably become, the most important player in legislative outcomes in Washington now, because he alone in the Senate, with parliamentary tactics, can tie up or try to tie up anything that this Republican Congress tries to do, from repealing Obamacare to repealing Dodd-Frank and all of those things. So there is still Chuck Schumer and the Democrats' filibuster power in the face of what we're seeing tonight.
That's if they hold.
But we're getting a little bit ahead of the election results, so we're going to go back to Brian for more of that.
Well, very true. I mean, if this goes Trump's way, Chuck Schumer of New York will be the senior elected Democrat.
And right, and it is without having control of one of the two houses, which is obviously what your party would prefer to have.
Right.
If you had to only have, if you had to be one minority party figure in a Washington completely controlled by the other party, what you would want to be is the Senate Minority Leader. You'd want to be Chuck Schumer in terms of being able to use the procedures of the Senate to try to block things as they go. I mean, we don't really know what the composition of the Senate is yet going to be. We still have, we do not have a call in the New Hampshire Senate race. We do not have a call in the Pennsylvania Senate race, or in the Nevada Senate race, or in the Missouri Senate race. We've still got 4 outstanding. Those numbers will become very, very important. But we do know that the House will go to the Republicans, that Paul Ryan will at least start this next Congress as Speaker of the House. We haven't yet seen what revenge Donald Trump, if he is elected president, he will take on Paul Ryan. But Democrats right now, looking ahead to a potential Donald Trump presidency, are trying to figure out what levers of power might exist, full stop.
I'm also thinking of John Roberts. Does he look around and say, how few justices, really, how many do we need to do this? Let's go to Andrea Mitchell over at Clinton headquarters at the Javits Center. Andrea, I imagine that is the biggest shift in mood that you've ever seen in a large ballroom.
You could say that again. It is just palpable. When those states started turning and they began to see these numbers, people just standing shell-shocked. And there's no live entertainment here. They've got the network projections up. They've been piping in speeches like Andrew Cuomo's from outside. Chuck Schumer also, when he declared victory in his own Senate race. So there's no one here to rally this crowd. There's been radio silence except for a few communications that were received received without any quotations possible on what they still believe their path to victory would be to my colleague Kristen Welker and me and our other colleagues here. But other than that, we have heard nothing from the Clinton family. Earlier in the night, they were so optimistic they were giving us color details about what little Charlotte, the older grandchild, was wearing. And at that point, they were talking about a victory speech, very frankly. So this is putting an enormous damper, obviously, on this, and it's a very narrow path now. She has to, draw a royal straight on those remaining states.
Andrea Mitchell, thanks. Nicole Wallace has rejoined us with some reporting from inside what has been going on in Trump Tower.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you put it to Kellyanne at the beginning of the night about whether he was prepared to speak to both outcomes. I'm told that he just headed back to the residence to work on a victory speech. And
he had the other one ready?
I don't know that he did. I mean, I'll let her speak to that. But he had a traditional transition, run by Chris Christie and some folks with knowledge of how the government works. And he was so superstitious about his own long odds that he's really not paid much attention at all. I think the transition period is 78 days. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Mitt Romney, as you might expect, as a business guy, had a really well-executed transition plan. Donald Trump also has had a team that's been working in vetting potential nominees for many, many months for a transition. So all these things that no one talked about because we accepted the polls. When someone's ahead by 3.5 points, maybe you should be asking more questions. But the work of a transition has been underway, and I imagine we'll start hearing information tomorrow. He'll probably get briefed on that for the first time, I would guess.
Let me ask you this, and include your circle of friends, you and Steve. If it were drawn from the usual folks, you would say, what a strong bench they have.
Right.
But we can't assume anything.
Well, listen, 3 years ago, he was a Democrat, so I wouldn't assume that you can't assume anything. I mean, who knows? I mean, who knows who we'll pick from? And a guy that without 15 minutes in government just I think is on his way to winning tonight. So who knows what he values in an appointee? I have no idea. But I know that the transition was done by people from inside the GOP establishment, and the people were vetted in a very traditional way. So I think when you start hearing names, they won't be the kind of names that have been floated on the campaign side. That information that's been out in the last 48 hours has come from the campaign. There was a separate entity, a transition, with a transition staff that was doing the actual vetting of potential nominees.
Steve Schmidt, someone getting off a transcontinental flight and walking through the airport and pausing to listen to us right now would see that our talking points don't match up with the known knowns of the graphics. No one's been elected here. What's your view as to what's happening here?
Well, look, I think the body language at the Clinton campaign victory party says it all, is that Donald Trump is on the precipice of becoming the president-elect of the United States, of being the commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful military with its most potent nuclear arsenal. And I do think we should spend just a second talking about one of the history-making aspects of tonight, which would be the execution of probably the most successful intelligence operation since the code breaking in the Second World War, where you had a hostile foreign power intervening in an American election, trying to influence its outcome with the WikiLeaks attacks and the hacking of the Democratic Party and in the Clinton emails, and certainly it's had an impact on the election, on her reputation. And maybe an obvious question is, why are the Russians so keen on having a candidate of their preference be elected? But we're just in uncharted territory. Well, Chris, I think every intelligence agency in the country, you listen to Mike Morrell. I don't think there's a lot. You listen to Mike Morrell. I don't think there's a lot of debate about.
No, there's no debate about the way they've interrupted. The question is what their ultimate motive is. Is it to have a candidate they want to win, or they just want to make us look like less a democracy than we've always seemed, to try to disrupt us?
I don't know.
That's an open question.
Well, I mean, let's take Trump at his word. I mean, Trump has said one of the things he wants to do is, if he won, he would like to meet with Vladimir Putin now, as president-elect, even while Barack Obama is still president of the United States, he wants a one-on-one Donald Trump-Vladimir Putin meeting. He wants those meetings to start now, even while we've still got another president filling out the end of his term. So those, I mean, I'm sure that's very attractive to Vladimir Putin right now, to be meeting with one president-elect while you've still got a president.
But that's a Logan Act violation. You can't negotiate for our government.
Before we plan an inauguration, let's go get an update from Steve Kornacki on Pennsylvania. Steve?
Yeah, this is a state, I think the last time I talked about this, Hillary Clinton had a lead. Seems like a long time ago. Just in the last few seconds, Donald Trump has polled within 7,000 votes statewide of Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania. Now, I can show you what is still out in this state. Democrats talked a lot about Philadelphia. Chris Matthews has been talking about, he's been getting some info there. His info's good. The Clinton margin's gone up. The Democrats did get their margin out of Philadelphia. This is sitting at about 450, a little north of 450. That's what they needed. Look in the suburbs, though. This is not what they expected. Look at Bucks County. Donald Trump doing as well as Mitt Romney did. In fact, a little better than Mitt Romney did in this county. Remember, we talked so much about the struggles he was supposed to have. But here's the thing. If you look at where the vote is still to come, there's still a little bit of a scattering in the Philadelphia suburbs. Clinton will still get some bounce from there. There might be a little bit left in Philadelphia. The biggest single source, let's see if this is what changed. No, the biggest single source of outstanding votes in Pennsylvania appears to be Butler County, which is this just north of Pittsburgh. Give you a sense, 4 years ago, nearly 100,000 votes were cast in this county. You can see they are just starting to count. This is a red county, and Donald Trump, I should say, the red counties you're seeing around Pittsburgh here and really all across Pennsylvania tonight, they're a lot redder than they were 4 years ago. So Donald Trump's going to get a lot of vote here. One other thing I can show you in Pennsylvania, we talk so much about Scranton. This Lackawanna County, where Scranton is, this was an absolute blowout 4 years ago. Barack Obama won this thing by 28 points over Donald Trump. 28 points. Tonight, Hillary Clinton's winning it by 3 points. That's the progress Donald Trump has made away from Philadelphia and the suburbs in this state. And that is why, let's see if we've got an update on the vote. Yep, that's why he's within 4,000 votes and closing in Pennsylvania.
Overall, 89% of the vote in Pennsylvania. Watching these numbers just click up. We're up over 50% in all the outstanding states. Minnesota's got just under 70% of the vote in. Wisconsin's got 3/4 of the vote in. Michigan's up over 60%. We're getting close. These numbers are getting tighter and tighter in terms of just the percentage of the vote that's in. At Maine right now, where we still don't have a call, 68% of the vote in. Hillary Clinton appears to be ahead in Maine, but we still don't have a result there either.
Well, it shows that the big city came through, but it also shows, you know, I heard another source today that the people out there on the Republican side have a real problem. They hold their nose on Trump, but they do care about the Supreme Court. And he was able to get people to vote for his party line despite him.
I heard that from John Boehner a week ago. I said, what's your message? He's out there, obviously a private citizen now, giving speeches. And he said, my message is exactly as you articulated in the same words. You know, hold your nose and vote for him for the sake of the Supreme Court. It obviously resonated.
Yeah. Who knows what he's going to do in the Supreme Court?
Exactly.
I maintain that we have no idea what he's going to do about anything.
Exactly.
The fact that he put out a list that he never read, that somebody else gave him to put out as his list of Supreme Court nominees.
How about an evening? What time is it now? At midnight. Where the Democrats' fondest hope is how to figure out how to replace Mitch McConnell with Chuck Schumer. What kind of an opposition leader can the Democratic Party fashion? I mean, it's a pretty depressing thing for the Democratic Party right now to say, how obstructionist can we be, as Lawrence pointed out? What role can we play with the 60-vote goal to prevent them from getting anything done? Isn't that a wholesome notion, already planning? The Republicans may not know what they're going to do as president, but the Democrats are already planning how they can obstruct it.
Well, we don't know if that's what they're planning.
Well,
I mean,
we're talking about it.
We're talking about it, but honestly,
the 60-vote objective, the 60-vote goal is a way to stop the other side from doing anything.
But we don't have any intel from the Democrats right now in terms of what they're hoping for. But what I do think that there's a different dynamic at work here than there would be in a different year's election, which is that Donald Trump has proposed stuff while running for president that is unprecedented in its radicalism. He has proposed banning people from this country on the basis of their religion. He has proposed banning. He has proposed a nationwide deportation force that would round up more than 10 million people in this country.
Terrific.
He has proposed building a wall on the southern border. And so if the Democrats are thinking about, well, what are our options? I mean, when you're talking about somebody who's brought forward a policy menu that's completely off the chart in terms of what anybody else has proposed, you do start thinking about what your options are within the realm of the democracy that we've got.
That's not just Democrats. I mean, listen, the policies you mentioned are appalling. I mean, and I think a lot of Republicans, I mean, that was where some of the divide with Paul Ryan came from after the Muslim ban. I mean, the two that you named, the mass deportation force and the banning of Muslims, most Republicans said were not only not in line with Republican values, they were un-American. So I think in terms of obstructing those two policies, there might be a bipartisan effort to say, well,
maybe.
So, you know, I don't know.
Maybe.
Hope springs eternal. We're in the shank of the night. But those two policies are appalling. And I don't think he won because of those two policies. You and I had this argument 10 months ago. I think he won despite those appalling, probably un-American and unconstitutional
After he proposed the Muslim ban, nationwide opinion polling of Republican voters showed 2/3 of them were in favor of the Muslim ban.
We don't see it in the exit poll. I don't think that animated his vote today. I think it was economic despair.
Here's another unusual aspect of this, too, is that so typically, you know, candidate is elected president and we say, well, the other party was defeated. And the reality here is if he becomes president-elect within the next couple of hours, two parties were defeated. The establishment of the Republican Party went down in flames with the Democratic Party as well. The party of Ronald Reagan, party of George Bush, 41, George W. Bush, President 43, who we worked for. The party doesn't exist anymore. And I'm not sure what the new Republican Party is and what it looks like and what it stands for and how it works with President Trump. I'm not sure what the opposition coalition looks like from a national security perspective. I know one thing. I know that John McCain feels a deep commitment to America's security alliances around the world and believes profoundly that they're essential to maintaining peace in the world. And so I don't know what the new coalition looks like in terms of advancing a President Trump's agenda or in opposition to it.
That'll make for an interesting dynamic. Steve Kornacki, you're in Wisconsin right now.
Let's take a look. We were looking at a Clinton lead of about, a Trump lead of about 60,000 the last time we checked in. That lead has increased. Trump's lead is now closing in on 100,000 votes in Wisconsin. Again, this is the product largely of these rural counties, just bit by bit coming in. Surprise Trump strength in Green Bay. The thing here for Trump, also La Crosse County, by the way, still a lot of vote to come in there. Donald Trump with the advantage. Meanwhile, more vote has come in from the two Democratic bastions. This is Dane County, University of Wisconsin-Madison, not all in yet. But again, think of it this way. 4 years ago, 300,000 votes were cast here. We are seeing higher turnout this year, but you can see a big chunk of the vote is now in there. Also, Milwaukee County, still vote to come in, so Clinton can still make up ground, but Trump can too, and Trump is now sitting on an advantage in Wisconsin that is approaching 100,000 votes. One other thing I want to flag nationally right now, I don't believe I have this graphic I can pull up, but keep this in mind. Yes, we elect the president by the Electoral College. We're looking at the paths there right now. We are also tracking the popular vote. Right now, the popular vote in this race is sitting at about 50.8 million for Donald Trump, 49.7 for Hillary Clinton. We are, there it is, it's up on the screen right there. Oh, there you go, Donald Trump over 51 million. One thing to keep in mind, the single biggest source of votes, raw popular votes that's left on the map is California. It is only started to report right now. Hillary Clinton north of 60% of the vote there. She's going to get an enormous popular vote advantage. It is just a seed to plant right now. As we talk about Donald Trump moving along this path to 270, there is simultaneously a path for Hillary Clinton to win the popular vote, even if she does not win 270 electoral votes tonight.
Wow. You also put the Gary Johnson photo up there in terms of that popular vote. We've been trying to keep just an informal eye. This is not something that's being tracked from our election desk, but just keeping an informal eye on Gary Johnson's numbers and where third-party candidates conceivably might have made a difference. It appears that the third-party votes more than account for the margin of victory in Trump states, including Florida, in outstanding states where we don't yet have a call, including New Hampshire, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Again, we can't tell you where that third-party vote might otherwise have gone, but it looks like, particularly in Florida, which is a state that we've called, that third-party margin more than accounts for the difference between these two candidates in that state.
Can I offer a calming note on the issue of immigration, which is the most hottest issue? We're talking about banning people because of their religion, which is totally unconstitutional. in the end, if there's going to be a new immigration policy in this country, it's going to have a fulcrum of people that really are responsible people. It's going to be Rubio, and it's going to be Lindsey Graham. It's going to be Chuck Schumer. It's going to be, and of course, your guy, John McCain. It is going to be a people in the relative center on this question who are relatively pro-immigration. And they are good people about this one issue. I think they are. Yeah. So whoever, left or right, has to cut their deal to win in the center and to get the 60 votes. They're going to have to deal with these people. So the good thing, if you're concerned about immigration, you want a solution to it. You want a true comprehensive solution, which includes some kind of restraint on illegal hiring, opportunities for people to become certainly green card people and maybe citizens. There is a route, and it only goes through those guys in the middle. So I know
you think
Trump
Donald
has said,
Trump is going to sign immigration reform?
I'm just saying if there's going to be any change in the immigration law, it's going to have to go through these guys.
I can't imagine. I mean, Donald Trump.
They're not going to build a wall.
Donald Trump campaigned on building a wall. Donald Trump campaigned on deporting more than 10 million people. He campaigned on Mexican immigrants being rapists. This is not a guy who's going to
It's not a tyranny.
He's not going to sign. He has to sign the legislation.
He will deal where he has to deal to win.
This debate has ended up among the same through two presidents. This debate has ended up in the hands of the same group of bipartisan senators.
They're the ones who'll decide.
The late Ted Kennedy was in the middle of it.
He was definitely in the middle.
And John McCain and George W. Bush, and they had an opportunity, a window to do something done. It was ultimately sabotaged by Republicans. But you're right. I mean, lawmaking is very different than running the kind of campaign he ran, and people are really scared. So I think that's a really important.
Most of the campaigning is BS. Let's be honest about it. It's saying stuff to get votes. When he gets to the presidency, if he's the winner, I don't know who the winner is tonight. Either person has to succeed as president. And the only way you succeed as president is to pass law that you can sign.
Right. And that's it. That has what you described as a 63% approval rating among the public.
You guys, what lesson did the Republican Party just teach itself about the politics of immigration reform? I mean, in the primary, was there any worse vulnerability for any Republican running for office than having been soft on immigration reform, right? And then the guy that they picked was not a guy who's just a hardliner on immigration reform. He's the build the wall guy. They're not looking at this thinking, God, you know, we really got to deal with this immigration issue. They went harder and harder and harder line on this, and the people who went the hardest line got the biggest rewards. And that is not a recipe for constructive policymaking on that issue. It's not a recipe for any sort of policy making on anything that's going to involve any of the centrists that you're talking about.
But for sure, we're not going to have a terrific wall with a beautiful door for the good ones to come back any more than the dinosaurs are coming back to life. Right? It's not happening. It's not happening, right? I mean, it's fantastical imaginary stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we just we just made a decision here in this country. We're in the process of making a decision here that a lot of people thought was totally impossible.
Well, I'll take the
guy at his word.
I'm taking the Faulknerian position, which we will not only endure, we will prevail. And I just Faulknerian position, which we will not only endure, we will prevail. And I just accept that view. That's how I survive. We will make it. We will make it even with Trump if it comes to that.
I take the guy at his word. He's going to do what he says he's going to do.
Guantanamo is still there.
Hi, let's go out to Nevada, where Harry Reid is vacating his Senate seat, and where the Democrats had the chance to have the first Latina woman in the U.S. Senate, and they appear to have done so. It was tight all the way. Joe Heck, his fortunes kind of rose and fell, and tonight they fell just enough for the Democrats to hold a net hold of this seat. We're going to take a break. We'll have more of our live coverage when we come back. We are back. We want to show you this is the Trump ballroom at the New York Hilton Hotel on 6th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan, a stone's throw from our building, and across town on the Hudson River on Manhattan's west side, a huge cavernous space inside the Javits Convention Center. So named for the late great former New York Republican senator. There in the middle of the United States is the lectern where we were supposed to hear, where we will eventually, one would assume, hear from Hillary Clinton. The crowd came in very jazzed up, high energy. We saw the overflow room And then as the first projections came in, the mood started to sour and then darken. And there have been sporadic pictures of people in the crowd in tears, embracing each other, that sort of thing. Steve Kornacki is at the board with new numbers out of the state of Pennsylvania.
Told you a few minutes ago Donald Trump was closing in on the lead in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump now has the lead in Pennsylvania. He's moved ahead by 1,000 votes. The reason we told you the biggest source of outstanding votes left on the map in Pennsylvania was right here in Butler County, a Republican bastion that Donald Trump tonight has made more Republican. You can see it's now reported. Donald Trump with a very lopsided victory there. That is enough to put him in the lead. A couple of other things, though, going on this map right now. More vote coming in still from Philadelphia. Chris Matthews is right. They really got the job done there. The Democratic machine now 453,000. Still maybe some more to come out of there. There are still some votes here in the Philadelphia suburbs. Two pieces of bad news for Democrats. Number one, that doesn't necessarily mean they're votes for Hillary Clinton. You can see here, well, actually, this looks like it's just changed. We have it red. Trump and Clinton have been going back and forth here. Clinton now edging ahead of Trump in Bucks County, but they're basically tied there again. The thought here for Democrats was they'd be comfortably ahead in the suburbs. Also this, you see one piece of gray here. There's one county in the state of Pennsylvania yet to report, Lebanon County. This is a Republican county. You're going to get at least 60,000 votes out of here. Mitt Romney won this by 2-1 in 2012. So Donald Trump right now, the biggest single source of votes left on this map belongs to Donald Trump, but there still are scattered votes coming in. You can see Trump's lead sits at about 2,400 right now over Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania.
Obviously, Steve Kornacki, you are not making projections from the wall, but it sounds like you can see where Pennsylvania is going to end from where you stand.
Now, there's also some question here. Do we have absentee ballots if it gets really close here? I mean, you look at a margin like this. If you have absentee ballots, if you have something that's really close, you could say an apparent winner or something. At this point, though, Trump has taken the lead. That's what I'll say for right now.
All right, Steve Kornacki. Again, the states that we are watching that are still outstanding at this point: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, New Hampshire, Maine. That's all that's left on the board. Neither of these candidates has made it to 270. Trump is significantly closer, and he's within a state or two.
This is the time of night we often call in Michael Beschloss, presidential historian, author, and a frequent contributor to us. Michael, we've had wave elections, we've had trend elections, we've had status quo elections. What, in your personal scope of history, are you comparing the possibility of tonight to?
Sure looks like a wave election where there is a trend through all these states. And one thing, Brian, we've talked about all sorts of reasons why the Donald Trump surge happened tonight. One of them is, I've been thinking about it all evening. 2 years ago, exactly this month, President Obama made a little noticed comment. He was talking about 2016 and who might succeed him. And he said, it may be impossible for me to pass along this job to a Democratic successor. He said, the people may want that new car smell. That was the term he used. 1836, Jackson was able to pass the White House on to his vice president, Martin Van Buren. The next time that happened, you have to go all the way up to 1988 when Ronald Reagan was able to do that for George H.W. Bush. Even, for instance, in 1960, when Dwight Eisenhower, very popular president, tried to leave the presidency to Richard Nixon, couldn't do it. Bill Clinton, whose popularity had rebounded by 2000, tried to do it for Al Gore, couldn't do it to such an extent that Gore was able to escape the fate of the recount in a Supreme Court ruling. The Democrats lost the White House. So I think as we think about all the reasons why this happened tonight, it's not reason number one, it's not reason number two, but on that list is the fact that structurally it was very hard for President Obama and the Democrats to retain the White House for another term and hand it along to his preferred successor.
Heretofore, to ask a structural question, they have been members of the kind of party apparatus. This is different because this is someone, as we've established over months, who kind of burned down the house of the party establishment, plowed through all of his competition and every contest during the primaries.
And wears that as a badge of honor, as we've said many times. This will be, if Donald Trump is elected tonight, this will be the first president that we have ever had with zero military experience, zero public service experience, and also probably the smallest relationship with the leaders of his party of any president that I can think of.
Yeah, it's hard to think of a sitting office holder who would be Jeff Sessions in the Senate, Chris Christie, the governor for another year of the state of New Jersey. It's difficult when you look at allies, people he could hit the ground working with.
And not only that, if you're thinking of things that we've never seen before, the talk both from Mr. Trump and the people around him that he may undermine the sitting Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and try to look for someone else and throw Ryan out.
Michael, on that point, I was just about to ask you about that. Are there historical allegories to that sort of thing? I mean, there's been so much interpersonal drama even within parties over the years. I have to believe something like that has happened before, but I don't know about it. Has that happened before?
I can't think of a case where a new president has come in and said, you know, we've got a speaker of my own party, even though I may not like him, I'm going to work with him. That's usually what you hear. I can't think of a case where a new president said, concurrent with my inauguration, I'm going to commit a coup d'etat against the Speaker of the House.
Oh, Michael Beschloss, I take such comfort in thinking it's my own ignorance when I think something is unprecedented. I always think you're going to tell me, oh, no, it happened in the 1880s and everything was fine.
Sorry, I can't find any reassurance on that one, Rachel.
Oh, great. NBC News presidential historian Michael Beschloss, thank you. A comfort to have you here, if not a comfort in the comment. I want to also bring back into our conversation now the good and great Chris Hayes, who's been at the news desk for us tonight. Chris, what do you got?
So we've been following some of the first kind of reverberations of what appears to possibly be, obviously it's not been called at this point, but the market's beginning to price in the possibility of a Donald Trump presidency. The Dow is down 800. Now, here's an interesting data point. NASDAQ and the S&P 500 have halted trading on the futures market until the opening of equities markets tomorrow because they hit the 5% loss break, which essentially is an automatic emergency break that happens when crashes happen. So that trading's been halted. That gives you a sense of how global financial markets are most likely going to respond if it is the case that Donald Trump pulls out a victory tonight and is declared the president of the United States tomorrow when those markets open. Also, something else has crashed. The Canadian immigration website, this is not like some joke, it actually is crashed from apparently people's interest there. So we're just now, again, beginning to see how some of this is going to reverberate out across the world. There will be a lot more of that if this night continues in its current trajectory.
Again, just to be clear on that market data, Chris, it's the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. They have halted trading in futures because they've triggered the crash warning. Basically.
That's right. So all those markets obviously trade during the day, during business hours. There's a futures market for off business hours. The futures market, if things are moving in the market while the market's closed, people will try to essentially get ahead of that for tomorrow. Those future markets hit their essentially bottom, their automatic break switch. They've now opened back up again for trading, so we'll continue to monitor those.
Wow. While the Dow futures are down up over 750. Chris Hayes, thank you. Invaluable.
While a lot has happened, we're also watching a lot yet to happen. We're going to fit a break in here. Our live coverage continues right after this. We are back, and we wanted to just take stock of the states that have yet to be called. Pennsylvania and its 20 electoral votes still too close to call. Michigan is also on that list, as is Arizona, still too close to call. Upper Midwest includes Wisconsin. We just had a projection. This is a call interrupting our list. Hillary Clinton is the projected winner in Nevada with its 6 electoral votes. Here is where that leaves us. 244, 215. Trump over Clinton. And here's what the map looks like with the pickup of Nevada for the Clinton campaign. You see the coastal argument people have been making. It's pretty hard to deny that we are a coastal blue country. Steve Kornacki has been looking at the state of Pennsylvania. He's been looking at the path to 270. You name it, he's got it.
Let's take a look in Pennsylvania right now in terms of, oh, that's the wrong thing. Let's try to get Pennsylvania up here. I'm sorry, this thing is about to collapse, I think. Let's see if we can get in Pennsylvania.
Come on, Pennsylvania.
Come on.
Come on.
See?
Will it?
Click on. There it is.
So.
We got everything but the results. Let's see if those come up. Oh, for God's sake. Guys, can you come back to me in a minute?
Yeah, we will.
That's unbelievable.
In terms of outstanding states right now, we've got 6 states outstanding, and it's an interesting grouping. We've got Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. We've got New Hampshire and Maine in the Northeast, and then we've got Arizona in the Southwest. So 6 states outstanding altogether, with Nevada now off the map and in the Democratic side. What was that for, Chris?
No, I'm just amazed at the ethnic breakout of the country, the way it's going.
Yeah.
It's what's going on. It's not a pretty picture.
No, it's not pretty at all.
Yeah, I'm just watching it when you get a tremendous black vote out of the city of Philly, and then you have this counterpunch.
Yes, you do. I mean, you had very robust turnout among Latinos, among African Americans, who came out, who delivered the votes, but there was a much bigger turnout from those rural areas, from those small towns, from not just the Rust Belt, actually. I mean, it's beyond the Rust Belt. So I don't know. There's obviously a racial divide. There's a urban area versus exurb or small town or rural area divide. There are lots of ways to split this up, and we're gonna spend a lot of time figuring it out.
It's not the usual result in American history. It's center left and a center right party sort of splitting somewhere in the middle. This is a different kind of division.
No, this is, and it's troubling. In some ways, it's the America of yesterday versus the America of tomorrow. I mean, the America of yesterday appears to be winning tonight. The America of tomorrow, the America of our demographic future, the America that's more cosmopolitan, more connected with the globalized economy, that's doing better from it, seems on the verge of losing.
At this point, though, we don't have the final result. We don't have the final demographic splits, and we don't know how the country is going to evolve in the future. Like, I don't think that we can say that all the people who gave Donald Trump these majorities tonight are going to be dead in 10 years, right? It's not a waning demographic. I don't think that the country is shifting away from the groups that are giving him these majorities. If they were, he wouldn't be winning in such big majorities. Right now he's put together a list of wins that's impressive by any Republican standard. He hasn't taken any deep blue Democratic states. He's just taken every state that was within reach.
Yeah, but what I'm arguing is that the sorting out that's been going on in American life is really advancing, where you have big cities which are overwhelmingly liberal, progressive, if you will, black and white and brown liberals, and then you go right outside and you find another part of the country which is just the opposite. This is a divided country.
Right.
And sorting itself out.
I would just like to point out how badly everyone in Washington, D.C. has been disconnected from all of this. Because I got to tell you, it's not just Democrats shocked, surprised, stunned, probably saddened by this. It's also all of the Republicans who worked for those 16 other people who ran for president, who I've been, kind of talking to all, and they were waiting for Donald Trump to lose so that they could move on to the next thing. And I have to say, I just got off the phone with Senator Lindsey Graham, who is one of those people who obviously ran against Donald Trump and who called some of his comments un-American. He didn't vote for him tonight. And now he's saying, okay, well, if Donald Trump is the winner, he's going to be my president. I'm going to have to try to find consensus. He says he will work with Donald Trump to try to repeal Obamacare, do some of these other Republican priorities. He says that he will not, and the quote is, when it comes to being a friend to Putin, count me out. So some early indications from Graham that he wants to be a little bit of a thorn in the side. He also said, for example, that deporting 11 million people who are already here in an undocumented status isn't something that could pass the Senate. That, of course, is a policy that Trump has put forward. forward. But I think you're starting to see people in Washington grapple with this idea of Donald Trump being in charge that just seemed completely like it was from another planet, even 4 hours ago.
Well, it is. I mean, to the people in Washington, it is from another planet, right? They've never seen anything like Donald Trump. And it will be an amazing thing to watch as he comes to Washington, if indeed he does come to Washington. We don't know yet that he will, but if he does, that's going to be an incredible thing. I do think, though, that we shouldn't avert our eyes from the fact that, you know, this big vote for Trump, this is not a rainbow coalition out there voting for I mean, it's not. It's just not. And you look at where these votes are coming from, and you look at who lives in these areas. These are overwhelmingly white areas of the country. And he did not expand his appeal to encompass people of color.
Well, and you know, I spent 4 months on the road with Bernie Sanders, and that should have also been another earlier indicator to the Clinton campaign of just how, you know, wrong that they may have had some of these things. And those crowds, often overwhelmingly white as well, overwhelmingly often. I came away from that feeling almost as though, and ideologically very different, obviously, but Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump in many ways had more in common with each other, and Hillary Clinton and Paul Ryan in many ways have more in common with each other than those respective party labels.
Doris Kearns-Goodwin is the latest guest to join us. Wow. She's been listening to the coverage, keeping one eye on her television.
Well, I guess so.
Hey, Doris?
I'm not sure I'm listening.
Oh,
to
boy.
All
right. It's a necessary evil for all of us.
Let me correct something that in this moment, let me correct something that I said wrong the other day.
Yes.
Or said just a few moments ago. I said that there were 6 states outstanding. I forgot Minnesota. To my many friends in Minnesota, I'm sorry. Minnesota also still outstanding at this point, and leading and adding to the number of those upper Midwest states in that cluster, that one cluster of the country where we don't yet have an answer. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all outstanding, as well as New Hampshire and Maine in the Northeast and Arizona in the Southwest. Sorry, 7 states outstanding.
Steve has wrestled his technology to the ground.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. It's going to probably turn on me again here in the next few minutes, but let's see if I can squeeze this in. Big development in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump's lead here just jumped up in the last minute. He now leads Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania. Look at this, by 26,000 votes. Remember, we said this has been the white whale for Republicans since 1988. Every Republican candidate says they can flip it. None of them have led this late into the night in Pennsylvania. Now, the question in terms of can Trump hold on to that again, we're saying still a little bit of some scattering of precincts in Philadelphia County and a couple of these suburbs. So there could be more Clinton vote coming out of here. You also still have precincts left here. This is where Harrisburg is. This is where Hershey is. Still have votes there. But that is countered from Donald Trump's standpoint by this one. Lebanon County. It's produced 60,000 votes 4 years ago. This was a 2-to-1 Romney County. We don't have a single vote in from here yet. So Donald Trump stands to pick up ground there as well. His lead, 26,000 votes in Pennsylvania.
Wow, 0 vote in from that one county. Do we have any? We don't have any intel as to why that.
Well, there's a lot of good movies just coming out.
You know, that's true. It's been a nice day for a late walk.
Well, I suppose we're going to get a huge parcel of votes out of Lebanon County, PA at some point here.
Yeah. At this point, what we're looking for also is we don't have a lot of reporting on the sources of the delays from these states in terms of why we don't have vote that we don't have. Nobody is more than less than 50% out at this point. Arizona, 65% of the vote is in. In Maine, 76% of the vote is in. That's still considered too close to call. Hillary Clinton appears to be leading in Maine. So it's 4 electoral votes. Arizona, 11 electoral votes. New Hampshire, 4 electoral votes. And then the bigger ones, the big prizes, the double-digit EVs are Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, with Pennsylvania being the biggest one of those. Steve just giving us very good prospects there in terms of what's likely to happen with that last Pennsylvania vote.
And how interesting. You look at the map, with the exception of Arizona, longitudinally, it's longitudinally.
Got it.
I cheated myself on a syllable that first time. You could make an argument that it's all up there in the same area. Let's take a break, see if we can get any finer reporting on either headquarters. The map has not changed since our call of Nevada for Hillary Clinton. There is Trump headquarters, 6th Avenue, New York City, the New York Hilton Hotel. Across town, kind of a different picture, different energy at the Javits Center at Clinton headquarters. We're back with more right after this. We are back. There is Clinton headquarters inside the cavernous Jacob Javits Center. Much had been made of the fact that the ceiling is glass, made of glass panels, and certainly everyone had theorized, everyone had guessed that would be a central part of what they expected to be a victory speech tonight. As we mentioned, there was a plan that leaked for Victory Night fireworks over the Hudson River on Manhattan's west side. Those were canceled before they occurred. Kristen Welker is there for us. Kristen, what have you been able to gather there?
Brian, the mood is somber here inside the Javits Center. A number of supporters have left in tears. I've been walking around. People have stunned expressions on their faces. One person described it as grief setting in. Now, of course, this race is not over yet, but these supporters are just shocked by what they are seeing. One of Secretary Clinton's supporters and volunteers, Annabelle Avora, joining me right now. She is Cuban. She was born in Puerto Rico. She lived in New York, recently moved, but you just came back so that you could vote and volunteer for Secretary Clinton. Your reaction right now as you await these returns?
I came here today to cast my vote and to celebrate and to make history and to break the ceiling. All I want to do right now is just go underground. That's all I want to do. I'm sad, I'm disappointed, and I know it's not over yet, but it really feels like it's almost over.
There were so many issues that you were voting for, and that's why you voted for Secretary Clinton. What are your concerns if Donald Trump does, in fact, win tonight? What's your top concern?
One of the biggest concerns is that I'm a two-time breast cancer survivor, and I know what it's like not to have access to a doctor or to suffer from pain. And considering what's going to go on with the deductibles and the rise in the deductibles, I'm afraid that people are actually going to be without access to health care, and that the numbers are going to rise and it's going to get worse in this country.
All right, Annabelle Avora, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us. This crowd continues to watch these returns, but again, Brian, it is quiet here tonight, shocked, stunned disbelief as they watch these returns come in. This was not the celebration they were anticipating. They thought they were here to make history, and it is not turning out that way, Brian.
Kristen Welker at the Javits Center in New York. Soon, no doubt, we will get reporting as to what's been going on. Clinton headquarters in Brooklyn, the kind of traveling Clinton headquarters in Manhattan, where this was obviously supposed to be a celebration with former president and extended family. Steve Kornacki is at the board. Steve, do you have any new math?
We do. Pennsylvania, we've been monitoring this. Donald Trump's lead has grown. Why has it grown? We said one county was outstanding. That county, let's get it here. That county has now come in, Lebanon County. You see Donald Trump adding 20,000 votes to his lead. We really are only looking at a scattering of precincts, maybe some absentees left somewhere around the state right now. But Donald Trump sitting there now at a 35,000 vote lead in Pennsylvania. If we zoom out, that bottom line question here, if Hillary Clinton is trying to get to 270 electoral votes at this hour, how could she do it? She would need a couple of things here. First of all, if she somehow got a win in Pennsylvania, that would be she would get 20 electoral votes. If she could get Michigan, she trails in Michigan right now. That'd be 16, 36 to 215. You're sitting at 251. If she could then pick up Minnesota, if she could get 10 there, she'd be sitting at 261. Then the best thing for her would be Wisconsin. The problem, she's trailing in Wisconsin. We've been showing you all night. That hasn't changed. She continues to trail. But if she were to pick up Wisconsin, that's 271. That kind of looks like the most viable path, maybe the only viable path here. And I'm not even sure how viable it is because, again, we just showed you she's 35,000 votes behind in Pennsylvania. She's behind in all these states right now. You look in Michigan right now. Look at this. She's running 42,000 votes behind Donald Trump. Now, there still is vote to come out of Wayne County here. There's also vote coming out of these Republican areas. She's still behind in Wisconsin. This has been stubborn. She's 90,000 votes behind out there. She'd have to find a way to string all three of those states together. It's pretty much her path right now because Arizona, I can tell you, is not looking good from the Clinton standpoint.
Steve Kornacki at the board.
So, Steve, in terms of those states that we've got out, obviously, Steve, we've got Alaska coming at the top of this next hour. That is the state that has yet to close, the only state where polls are still open in the country. At this point, the Trump campaign is just waiting basically for the numbers to fall in place. But we're not, in terms of anything outstanding right now, there's not really a potential for a surprise here at this point, is there?
A lot of Democrats, certainly online I see are talking about Arizona. You look at 11 electoral votes. Here's the reality in Arizona. 2 counties are sort of the story of the state, one where Phoenix is, one where Tucson is. And what you see here is it's not what Democrats need. They've tightened the margin from 2012. You see Trump is leading by 3 points, but I can show you Maricopa County here. Bottom line, the margin shrunk. Romney won this thing by a bigger spread, but Trump is still winning it. This is by far the biggest county in the state. So you see Donald Trump, even by winning with a narrow margin, it's almost 40,000 votes, his lead there. And you see, what's the Clinton margin here in the second biggest county? This is where Tucson is. It's just over 40,000 votes. This is an improvement for Democrats in what they saw in this state 4 years ago. It's why this was a fringe target for them. But right now, it's not enough. When Maricopa and Tucson are just sort of canceling each other out, not going to be enough. And then you see a lot of these areas around the rest of the state are Trump areas. So this one is not looking good for Clinton. If she can't pull a rabbit out of her hat here in Arizona, I can also tell you we have not called it. There's this congressional district, this second congressional district up here in Maine, a rural one. Donald Trump is out to a pretty sizable lead in that district. Again, stressing we haven't called it. There is also, you wouldn't know it from looking at this map, there's one congressional district here in Omaha. Again, Nebraska, like Maine, gives it out by congressional district. That's been close. The Trump lead, though, in that district currently sits at 5,000 votes. So if there was some scenario here where Clinton could pick off that district, sweep Maine, get New Hampshire, the problem is she's running into a hurdle there in Omaha. She's running into a hurdle there in rural Maine as well. So again, it really seems like for Hillary Clinton, if there's any kind of a path here, it's some sort of Rust Belt miracle. Down in PA, down in Michigan, down in Wisconsin, somehow with very few votes left, got to win all 3 of them.
Steve Kornacki, thank you. Incredible. The number of numbers that Steve is able to keep in his head while he goes through those things is stunning. I have to say, I keep flashing back to my conversation a week ago, I guess it was, with Bill Weld, with the former Massachusetts Republican governor who's running as the vice presidential nominee of the Libertarian Party. And he came on my show and he gave an impassioned criticism, just a litany of criticism against Donald Trump. And then he said he was there to vouch for Hillary Clinton. And he said he would not say that he was dropping out of the race. He would not say that people should not vote for the Libertarian ticket, but that if they had a choice, people had a choice between Trump and Clinton, he could not have been more emphatic in terms of his preference for Clinton. But it matters who you vote for, not just how you feel. And in all of these states where we are seeing the Johnson number be significantly larger than the margin between these 2 candidates. What they were asking for was an anti-Trump vote, but they weren't willing to say and cast it for Clinton. That's what they needed to say. And to the extent that the anti-Trump vote was a Gary Johnson vote, that may have made Trump president.
It matters, yes. Had there been a pro-Clinton fervor, the likes of which we've seen for Trump tonight, the story we're covering now would be different. Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us from Boston, Mass., author and presidential historian. Doris, what are we witnessing?
Well, I suspect that the intensity of the feeling for Mr. Trump outweighed our normal predictions that a ground game mattered, that somehow this entire race we have underestimated the feelings of the people who felt that the political system had let them down over this period of time. But I think the worrisome thing for America is it's so close, this election, that whoever is going to be the leader, whether it be Trump or Hillary pulls it out, is going to have a really hard time leading in a polarized. The last thing we needed as a polarized nation was to have a polarized election where there may be recounts, where people are going to wonder whether it went the right way. Will people wonder if the third party undid it? We need some direction. We need somebody to take us forward in a certain way. And what worries me most is that we worry about both these people as leaders. People don't trust either one of them. And we're at a state in our country right now where we need somebody to just make us believe in the public system again. And this election is unlikely to do that. Even if people are happy about Trump, he's going to have a really hard time. If Hillary should pull it out, she's going to have a really hard time. And that shouldn't make anybody happy. The one thing that's good is that people have voted. And, that they have come out in ways that we might not have thought they would. And I don't know whether they're going to feel that sense that their vote mattered. They should. Every individual vote is showing that it's mattering right now. It's incredible how close this is, how divided our country is.
Doris, you and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago in a different context about historical parallels for what we are looking at this year and for the kind of choice that the country had to make. We are still absorbing what's going on tonight, and we obviously still do not have a call in the presidential race and in a number of states. Anything is still possible, but it's looking like Donald Trump is likely to be the winner at the end of tonight. I wonder if now that we are on that precipice, if you feel like there is anything in history that can give us a guide to understanding a character like Donald Trump as a president of the United States, if there's any parallels you see to any historical figures in all your scholarship.
I'm not sure there's a parallel to an historical figure, but I do think there's a parallel to an historical time for sure. When you look at the feelings that people had in the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the 20th century, they felt the country was changing in ways that they were frightened about. People were moving from farms to cities. There were big monopolies taking over small monopolies. There were lots of immigrations coming in from abroad, and the pace of life was speeding up. And there was populism then. There were demagogues then. As it turned out, the Republicans carried it through, and Teddy Roosevelt was able to channel a lot of that anxiety into positive action so that the country moved forward. But I think now you've got that feeling that the country is changing beyond the ways that a lot of people feel. You've got immigrants coming in. There's a sense that cities have overtaken rural areas, and that cultural divide and that sense of inequality that we're feeling is the same that we had at the turn of the 20th century. So that feeling, it's almost against modernity. It's against change. And obviously, Mr. Trump has captured that. Again, whether he wins or not, he's come really close to having captured that. And the question is, what do you do with that? Do you channel it in a positive direction? You can't go backward. This is our country. It's becoming more diverse. It's a good thing that it's becoming more diverse. And how are you going to make people feel that sense of fellow feeling once again, rather than one class versus another? The most important thing Teddy Roosevelt once said, a democracy depends on people feeling a sense that they're all in it together. And that's what America's always been so strong about, a diverse nation. And if we're feeling that we've cut each other off now and we're looking backward and forward, it's a scary time in that sense. So my hope is that somehow leaders stand up to it, and we need leadership now more than ever.
Doris, you write beautifully about the Roosevelts and about the Kennedys. So let's talk about both of them. Their political party, the Democrats. Back when Bobby was killed, Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote a letter to Ted Kennedy, who survived, the surviving brother, and said, Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote a letter to Ted Kennedy, who survived, the surviving brother, and said, you can't, we've turned away from the white working class. We've left them. They're our people. And, I've watched it many times, the pictures of the Bobby Kennedy train going through New Jersey, and I've watched the white, dirty faces of the white working class guys saluting the train as it went by, with his kid in dirty face saluting. That white working class that probably, I think of them as the guys rooting for the Vikings and the Green Bay. They were tough, big guys. They used to be Democrats. Parents certainly were. How the Democrats get them back, because if they don't get them back, they're out there. They voted for Trump. They're angry because they feel like they've been discarded by the Democratic Party. Do you agree with that? I think they were discarded. I don't think helping minorities should have necessarily meant exclude those people and discard them, but they feel discarded, and they voted for Trump.
Well, the interesting thing is, you're right about Bobby Kennedy. He was able to win the minority vote and that white working class vote and go through Indiana and be able to bring those two together. But I'm not sure it's so much that the Democratic Party has discarded them. Certainly not in policy terms have they discarded them. But I think we'll see what's happening. We'll see whether they ever come back to the Democratic Party. That's the challenge, that's for sure.
The best in the business, our friend Doris Kearns-Goodwin joining us from Boston. Doris, thank you so very much. We're now arrived at the 1 a.m. mark here on the East Coast, and that means the polls have closed in the state of Alaska. We have this to say about Alaska, and that is that it is too early to call between Clinton and Trump. Let us, however, look again at the electoral vote totals. Here, our bar graph on the side of the building now stands, as we've been chronicling all night, 244 Trump, 215 Clinton. In the balance is the red and blue. And this national map that we've been staring at all evening, going back and forth, starting in the east and going to the west with the time zones. Still outstanding, the states in gray, which we will now display. The states that are too close to call. Pennsylvania, too close to call, separated by 46,000 and change. Michigan, the difference of about 60,000 votes, too close to call. Arizona, out in the desert southwest, around 60,000 vote difference. Wisconsin, the Dairy Belt, 84,225 with 87% in. Minnesota, with just about 80% of the vote in. And finally, New Hampshire, too close to call, 82%. Look at the difference.
You think your vote doesn't matter?
You think your vote doesn't matter?
96 votes between the two of them.
Yeah, I said finally, I almost forgot the great state of Maine, which has been a pitched battle all night with 81% of the vote in. 17,000 votes separate 4 split electoral votes from Maine. And that's where we have it, 1 a.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, and we will have no more poll closings. This means that polls are closed throughout the country.
Yeah.
This is it.
We've checked.
Yeah, exactly. We keep going west, but turns out that's where we are.
You see the map there of those 7 states? 5, the big ones, are leading with Trump's leading. The 2 little ones, Maine and New Hampshire, she's leading in. It doesn't look good for Hillary Clinton right now.
No, what Steve was saying, it would have to be a Rust Belt miracle at this point to pull it off. It is hard to imagine. But we will wait here and be here until we know. Steve Schmidt, what are you thinking at this hour?
Well, I agree with Chris. I think it's looking very, very dim for Secretary Clinton at this hour. I think that it's almost impossible to see how you pull that inside straight, come back in all of those states.
Yeah.
It's not like she needs one. She has to overcome big deficits in all of those states. So, I think the hour is drawing close, where Donald J. Trump will be the president-elect of the United States.
Can I ask a question? Because this is somewhat whimsical. Besides Donald Trump, and maybe Kellyanne Conway, and maybe Rudy Giuliani, who's going to be able to say, I told you so? This is going to be the shortest list. No, when did he make the call?
Joe Scarborough and Miko have seen the Trump.
When did he make the call?
They've seen the Trump thing from the beginning.
He made the call? When did he make the call?
They have seen the Trump phenomenon from the beginning.
Good loyalty there.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no, no one. I mean, I couldn't have been more wrong about this. I said, she was going to be at 323 to 340 electoral votes. Yeah. I've thought it's been over for weeks. Called it right in the primary, but early on. But what you're seeing here is just such a backlash in the country against the establishment of the country, a business establishment, a political establishment, a media establishment, across the board. And it's the collapse of trust in institutions that fueled the Brexit vote, and it fueled this vote. Steve Bannon was right, when he talked about the similarities between Brexit, about a rising populism, and this phenomenon is playing out across all of the Western democracies. And in the next significant global election, is another one where they say in France that Marine Le Pen can't win. She's at 40% ceiling. We'll see. Yeah. But this phenomenon isn't going away anytime soon.
I think part of it may well be that Secretary Clinton, the fact that she wouldn't be president didn't scare people into voting for her. That there wasn't a sense where maybe with Bernie they would have said, we got to get Bernie president. We're passionate about it. With Hillary, they said, well, if we liked her, I might try something out here because I'm not really worried about not having her as president. You know what I mean? There wasn't a big stake in her.
I think Peggy Noonan, wrote the best, most astute piece of the cycle when she wrote about the protected class and the unprotected.
You mean the people, the main goal in life is to get their kid into Sidwell Friends? That's their main goal.
And she wrote about what you're describing, this feeling of people being totally disconnected, and it's happening in Europe and it's happening here. And you talk about who can say that they, you know, Peggy got a lot of this right. I mean, Peggy Noonan was on to this divide. And whether you predicted the outcome correctly or not, there are people that sort of were on to this.
Do you think she voted for Trump?
What? I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know.
But, you know, Steve, when you were talking about Marine Le Pen, obviously Marine Le Pen is from Front National in France. It's seen as basically a pseudo-fascist movement on the far right in France. And her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, was seen as almost on the criminal edge of politics in France. And in terms of hate speech, inciting violence against immigrants, denying the Holocaust, all sorts of things like that. Marine Le Pen is a sort of shinier version of him, of her father.
Really cleaned up.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to put Trumpism as his iteration of republicanism along the same number line as the sort of British far-right nationalist xenophobic parties like UKIP that was so in favor of Brexit, like the British Union of Fascists, like Marine Le Pen?
100%. I mean, Lafarge was at the convention. Lafarge has been here campaigning for.
He went to a battleground state. He dropped him into
Trump.
a rally.
Yeah.
Look,
in Mississippi, he dropped him.
All of our lives. I talked about this the other night. You know, politics has been divided by a vertical line down the 50-yard line. We debate between the 45-yard lines, right, left. Right. We have overheated debates about, you know, the difference between justice and injustice is a 39.6% tax bracket or a 35% tax bracket. But politics now, the line is a lateral line. The people above the line are people who've benefited from the technological revolution, have benefited from globalization, and then there's people below the line who've been left behind. The seismic event of this last generation, really fundamentally what this race was about to some degree, is the hangover from the financial crisis. 13 million people lost their homes. 12 million people lost their jobs. The bankers got $1 trillion in bailouts, and no one went to jail. The ideological line is permeable. Right? You can move back and forth between the Donald Trump camp and the Bernie Sanders camp. And what's increasingly going to define politics is that over-under line. And you're seeing that, you know, really play out in this election cycle with long-term implications for both political parties and for both coalitions.
And for the idea of political normalcy, for how far apart those yard lines are that we play between.
Absolutely.
I mean, the reason he was able to be seen as somebody who would shake up the status quo is because he would say stuff that was seen as politically outrageous all the time because it was way outside those lines. I mean, proposing to ban Muslims from the United States is a really important part of why Donald Trump was elected, not based on whether or not you think he's going to do it, but because that put him as outside the norm, as somebody who was that un-PC.
Maybe the smartest thing that anyone said in this campaign was Selena Zito, you know, the Pittsburgh Tribune columnist, and you know, she said that elites take Trump literally but not seriously. And regular people take him seriously, but not literally. Yep. And just profoundly true.
You know, in Hollywood, they call it below the line. Mm-hmm. So if you're a name brand and you have a contract and you have a good agent, you're above the line. You're a big shot. The below the line people. So what in Hollywood do? They portrayed below the line people as Archie Bunker, and they made fun of. It turned out Archie Bunker was a popular figure, but the idea was to make fun of him. And so a lot of Americans said, "You've been making fun of us a long time. I think we're going to vote against you." And I think that's part of this. We'll see. There's going to be a lot of analysis, but I hope it's better polling than we've had so far. Because nobody predicted this thing.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'd like to get some pollsters in here and sort of tar and feather them for a while. It'd be kind of fun. Get them in here.
There's going to be tarring and feathering.
Let's talk about the prize in this. After all, is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Correspondent Ron Allen is there, where some people have gathered in what looks to be Lafayette Park across the street. Ron?
Yeah, Brian, we're out here right in front of the White House over there, and you can even see where the fencing is put up as they're building the inaugural stage, the reviewing stand. But there's a huge crowd that's been gathering out here for the past few hours. This was built as an anti-Trump rally, but there are people on both sides of this who are for and against Trump. I think the guys up there in the tree who you might see are people who are supporting Trump, and there are others who are here supporting Hillary Clinton, and they're watching this as we are and stunned, frankly. Here's a couple of folks I met earlier, college students from Georgetown. Now, you are You voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
How do you feel about what's happening tonight, and why do you think it's happening?
We're certainly disappointed about the results. I mean, we're still hopeful for something better to come, but we're not really sure how it's going to turn out. Definitely worried about the possibility of Trump being elected.
Have you given up hope? Do you still think there's a chance?
To me, what's the most concerning is how over the last 2 weeks it's been the very predominant sentiment of, oh, Hillary's going to win. All the polls were Hillary's going to win. So there was this like flow of information that was very inaccurate. And it's sort of shown how, with exaggerated voter turnout, a lot of people have come forward who were sort of not saying they were voting for Trump, who were like, oh, you know.
But you think it was that? You don't think it was this whole idea that people just don't trust Hillary Clinton and that there's that?
I don't think so, because, you know, if you look at even from today, 5 hours ago, the New York Times poll had Hillary Clinton had an 84% chance of winning. And then over the course of 4 hours, that was totally, you know, turned on its head just by people who, you know, due to the stigma attached to voting for Trump, maybe hadn't said they were voting for Trump and then came out.
Well, there are a lot of pollsters who are wrong. It's very wrong, apparently, as well. But again, it's not over yet. What about you? What do you think went wrong for Secretary Clinton?
I think a lot of the blame is going to go to the DNC for not giving Bernie a chance, I think. And I think a lot of the people who voted for Hillary thinking that she would take Trump in the election earlier are regretting their decision.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Again, Brian, a huge crowd out here gathering. It's been building through the night. It's very peaceful. People on both sides of this, a vigil, you might call it, as we sit and wait to see what happens, how this all plays out. Back to you, Brian, from the White House.
Really interesting. Really interesting responses. The young man who talked about the New York Times index, which so many, especially elites on the coast, have been following, did flip, exactly. Flipped right over.
Around 9:20 p.m.
Yep, I'm looking at this Politico headline that said, how did everyone get it so wrong? Which will be a conversation and a question that'll take care of a lot of people's nervous energy. Won't change the result, but it'll be fun. And
you know, seeing the White House behind that as the backdrop to those interviews that Ron was just doing. I mean, the Obama family, I don't know if they're all home tonight, but if you're Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, the kids, you're thinking about, you know, your 8 years coming to an end, and you've got your lame duck period ahead of you, and you're thinking about these results tonight, and you're thinking about what you thought you never would have to think about in terms of the future of the Democratic Party, in terms of the legacy of having been the first African-American president and the impact that had on this country and the way the country responded to it. It's got to be a really profound, I mean, more than anybody, I sort of want to hear from President Obama. Right now, I don't know when that will be proper. I don't know what we've never had in the modern era. We've never had a popular two-term outgoing president campaign with all his heart for his would-be successor, let alone have that would-be successor then lose. I sort of want to hear from him more than I want to hear from anybody right now, because I don't know what happens next for Democratic politics.
Or Joe Biden, who, you know, has to be wondering what might have been. I mean, he speaks to, he is sort of the one. We've talked so much, and we spent so much time covering for a tremendous bench of surrogates. Michelle Obama, President Obama. I mean,
Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden.
She just had this extraordinary, but nobody on her bench spoke to the mood of the country or her deficit with voters like Joe Biden. And Mike Barnicle was out with Joe Biden on Sunday and wrote an extraordinary piece in the Daily Beast about Joe Biden going home to Scranton and just his day on the trail and his relationship with his agents. And he sort of speaks street cop. He speaks working class voter. He speaks to all of the folks who have put all of these states that Steve's been showing us tonight over the line for Trump. And so I think there may be, I think the Obamas are probably having those conversations, but I bet the Bidens are having them too.
Yeah. But you know, he knows it. If you talk to Joe Biden without quoting him out of context or off the record, he gets it. And he's surrounded by people that don't get it. And he'll talk to you as a guy who gets it about what they did wrong this time.
Steve Kornacki, did they carry Scranton after all?
Like a Warner County.
Let's go in Pennsylvania. No, the answer is no, but the margin is 3 for the Democrats here. This was almost 30 points 4 years ago. We can tell you pretty much, you're looking at all the results from Pennsylvania. There are still some scatterings on here, but look at this margin for Donald Trump now. This thing has crept up. It is now north of 50,000 votes. With what is left here, there's always the possibility of some absentees we've got to figure out. It is tough to see. It is very tough to see a 50,000 vote deficit being made up by anyone. anyone with what's left on here. We said pretty much right now, Hillary Clinton, to get to 270, for all intents and purposes, she's got to find a way to win Pennsylvania. I just showed you what's going on there. She's got to find a way to win Michigan. Check this out. Donald Trump's lead here right now, sitting just over 70,000. The good news here for Democrats, there is a real shot for Hillary Clinton when you look. A lot of votes still in Wayne County, a lot of votes still to come out of here where the University of Michigan is. She could still net a significant share of the vote there. There's still some in Macomb, too, a big suburban county, blue-collar county that Donald Trump is winning tonight. So Clinton does have a shot at Michigan. But again, it's not just Michigan she needs. This, though, look at the news for Democrats here in Wisconsin. Again, 1984, last time a Republican carried this state. Donald Trump's margin here is sitting at 85,000 votes. There are... Yep. I was hearing something in my ear there. I thought that was an urgent call. Quickly, I can just finish Milwaukee and Madison. The two that are left, it does not look like they are going to produce. The two big ones left for Democrats, doesn't look like they'll produce that kind of a plurality.
There's a problem with your board, and they say we can't touch it till we fix the bug. So step away. That's what they wanted me to tell you. That's a problem with the board. Step away from the board. All right.
Steve is like, I'm happy to step away from the board. Okay. I'm worried that Steve's going to shoot the board at some point in the course of this evening.
We're going to have a board meeting, I think. Poor board. Poor Steve. We're going to take a break because that's what people do in this situation. 1:16 a.m. A lot still to cover. A very, very moving situation. A movable target here. Let's put it that way. There is your political nation, superimposed over the rink here outside our building. A vast area of red in the middle, stretching just about out to both coasts.
8 states still grayed out. That's what we're watching.
The race to 270 is what we're calling it. Donald Trump is at 244. He needs 26 more projected electoral votes. It is a much harder climb, not just the math, but the physics of it for Hillary Clinton. 215 won. 55 more needed. You have to look long and hard to see anyone who predicted this kind of outcome at this hour for tonight. 1:21 a.m. The states in gray have not been projected, but you see the colors of our nation there on the map. 8 states not called, as we've been saying, as our coverage has continued on through the night. Lawrence O'Donnell is with his insider guests in his studio. Lawrence.
Brian, we're here with Maria Teresa Kumar and Michael Steele, and we've been discussing this issue of the polls, and as the pollsters are going to get savaged, but all of the polls had this within the margin of error. Hillary Clinton's national lead was within a margin of error. The Florida polls, all of them were within the 3 points.
Yeah, they essentially got them right. They essentially figured out what the landscape would look like, but there were still some elements of this race that sort of popped up, particularly in some of these states where you're looking and you're going, look at the overperformance of the white vote in certain parts of the state. And talking to people and calling around, essentially what's happened is the Reagan Democrats have come back to Trump.
Right. Well, I think
that's made the difference here.
And I think it's going to be interesting because everybody kept saying that Republican women were going to pull for Hillary, and they clearly did not. Part of me wonders, what was the Comey effect? Because she had them, and all of a sudden Comey came out. So I think that will always linger in people's minds. But right now, I'm getting emails from folks. Everybody's really worried about the community, the Muslim American community, the Latino community. And if Trump becomes the president, he's going to have to figure out how to...
People who have felt threatened by this candidacy are feeling... What are they feeling tonight?
Los Angeles County, has had an increase of 24% in hate crimes since the candidacy was announced. And this is a bastion of liberalism in California. In my hometown, where I went to high school, last week, an elementary school that was Spanish dominant got spray painted with "Build the Wall Higher." Moms that had basically to tell their elementary school their kids of 5 years old of what happened to their school. So if Trump wins, he's going to have a conversation that turns down the temperature, that makes people feel inclusive, and he has to act presidential. And that's what Muslim Americans and Latinos and Asians are looking for right now.
Michael, is there a version of this in which Donald Trump finally sees that he's won, if he has won, and he doesn't in his next speech have to try to win votes by being inflammatory? That's not part of his next speech if he has won. Is there anyone there, and is there a part of Donald Trump that could hear the advice of now is the time to do everything you can to not sound threatening to anyone?
I think there is, and I think this is where, if this thing plays out with one state to go, this is where Kellyanne Conway in his ear will be very, very important, because the first most important thing you do when you're running for president is to select your vice presidential. The second is on the night you win and you address the nation, because that then gives some clues, not on policy, not on any of that stuff, but on how you want to bring the country together, to your point, Maria, bring people together and have people realize, okay, this vote was worth it. I think he can do that. I hope he can do that. He needs to do that.
Well, he needs to, because I think right now, otherwise we're going to have a Brexit moment where all of a sudden people have sticker shock and they're like, oh, shoot, what happened? Because it's not just that we're giving him the White House, the Senate, the Congress, but also the Supreme Court.
Brian, back to you. I think the moment of truth for Donald Trump tonight, if he gives a speech and hears chance of lock her up, what does President-elect Trump say in the face of chance of lock her up?
Among so many questions at 1:25 a.m. Eastern Time, so much we don't know yet. Steve Kornacki has come to an understanding with his technology. They've reached a working agreement. You all right?
Well, we'll see if he can hold up his end of the deal here, this big board. I'm going to have some words after this show tonight. So, look, exit polls here. We talked about this a lot in the run-up to this election. That split among white voters, college, non-college. We can tell you two things about that tonight, though. First of all, look, we said those early exit polls we showed you might change. They did a little bit. Donald Trump did better than we were initially telling you he did among white voters with a college degree. He wins by 4 points. Now, this is down from Romney by 14, but I have to say, this is a lot better than people thought Donald Trump was going to do with white voters with a college degree. They returned to the Republican fold in the stretch in this campaign. That's what it looked like. The other thing, non-college whites, that number tonight is 39. It was 26 4 years ago. Here's the other thing raising eyebrows. Again, we said we were keeping an eye on the Latino vote. As we've gotten more into the exit poll, now we can tell you, look at this. This is a surprise to a lot of people. Clinton wins the Latino vote 65-29 tonight. I just want you to remember, 4 years ago, the margin was Obama 71, Romney 27. That was a 44-point spread. Tonight, the margin, you're seeing, it's only 36 points. It's actually gone down in 4 years. Republicans did 8 points better tonight with Latino voters net than Mitt Romney did 4 years ago. Now, think about that in the context of this campaign, where all of the conventional wisdom said that number, that 27, was only going to go down. It was going to be somewhere in the teens. According to our exit poll, Donald Trump lands 2 points higher than Mitt Romney did, loses by 8 points less than Mitt Romney did with the Latino vote. But make no mistake about it, when you see the states on this path to 270 that Donald Trump is carving tonight, what's doing this for Donald Trump? It's the white vote. 4 years ago, people were saying after the election, no Republican could go higher than Mitt Romney did. Donald Trump's proven you can.
You know, on this Hispanic number two, it's fascinating because you're right. Donald Trump, if that number holds, he's doing better than Mitt Romney did with Latino voters. He's still doing worse than John McCain did with Latino voters. And the way he's making up for that, the way that isn't a fatal number, is by spiking the white vote. This is something that I talked about at the very beginning of the night, Chris, and you said you disagreed with me on it. But I do feel like a lot of the really ragged racial edge of what Donald Trump has proposed was designed to change the behavior of white people, to tap into a type of white vote, an enthusiasm among white voters that was going to obliterate anything you might otherwise need to get from people of color. I mean, we do have Clinton underperforming Barack Obama with Latinos. We have Clinton underperforming Barack Obama with African Americans, although that was expected. What we've got, though, the biggest number and the biggest thing that explains how Trump could maybe win the presidency with only 29% of the Latino vote is that he's spiked white vote. He has figured out a way to do that. And that has always been the far right's dream, that you could figure out a way to do it without minorities. In fact, you could figure out a way to do it on the backs of minorities by threatening minorities in a way that make a lot of people uncomfortable. But that does awaken something basically that's racial anxiety among whites. And that's how you win. That's been a dream on the far right. It's the Ann Coulter dream of white turnout.
Well, let me give the other version of that notion.
The way he did it
the way he did it.
Part of how he did it.
I have two tasks. Give me three. Number one, it took Joe Biden to call LaGuardia a third world airport. And then you saw Governor Cuomo trying to decide how to react to that. And that's like amateur now, calling LaGuardia a third world airport. We'll decide that. Casey Hunt has some reporting, and Mike Murphy joins us in the newsroom. Casey, what did you just learn?
Well, I mean, one thing I've been doing tonight is reaching out to people who worked for Bernie Sanders because they feel like they, learned a lot of lessons from their campaign. And I'm told Bernie and Jane Sanders themselves very saddened by what appears to be a looming Donald Trump win. Obviously, we haven't called that yet. And everyone that worked for them, for the most part, very upset about it. But there's a little bit of an element of I told you so, that you didn't pay attention to what was going on, that you didn't kind of embrace Bernie Sanders' ideas and approach early enough, and that it's cost them.
Mike Murphy, you've been politely listening to all of this. Was surprised to hear Michael Steele in the last conversation, and I see him, I'll raise this with him, say that the pollsters essentially got this right. They essentially did not get this right. We're covering a story that no one saw coming.
Well, my crystal ball's been shattered into atoms here because I predicted the exact opposite of what happened. But I'm a typical, campaign consultant type that we've been living and dying by data for a long time. And tonight, data kind of died. The exit polls originally were off. The polling beforehand, the most credible polling was off. And Trump has built kind of a new model here. And I think it had two parts. One is he had resonant issues. People want to change. They want to punish politics. And I agree with some of the stuff Chris said about how the working middle class has had it. And this is how they riot. They vote for people that the establishment thinks are irresponsible. But the other half, and we can't miss this, is what a big generic Republican wave it was. There was a real repudiation of Hillary Clinton and I think the Obama third term. It needed two pieces to be such a different kind of thing, and I think they were both very, very powerful. So there's going to be a lot of soul searching should Trump win, and looking at the numbers, I think that's more likely than not in the Democratic Party as well as in the Republican establishment.
What did the prairie fire of Bernie Sanders and the prairie fire of Donald Trump have in common?
They had a lot in common within that universe of primary voters because they both told people of different demographies who believed basically the American dream was not in a good position for them. They may not ever achieve it, that there was an enemy. With Bernie, it was, Wall Street, the money's in a vault. You ought to get it. You can get that PhD in yoga for free. With Trump, it was to the machinist in Detroit who is seeing jobs that they worked 20 years to get that are high-wage jobs leave the country. And so the enemy is Mexico and foreigners who are taking your jobs. Both were selling grievance politics with different kind of resentment to people who had lost faith in the American dream and had been through a lot of economic pain. It comes from a real place. I'm from Detroit. I have relatives who, see the machine tools they worked on dismantled and put on freight cars to Mexico.
How much of the blame when Clinton supporters look to blame things or people, how much of the blame do you think Governor Johnson correctly will get?
I think the third-party people will be in for some blame from both, but the forces were bigger than that. That's a tactical thing. But Hillary Clinton was brutally repudiated tonight, and Donald Trump's most populist arguments, rough as they were embraced.
He's arguing there that both were grievance politics candidates, sure, but they were selling grievance politics. They were also selling authenticity, and they were selling, something, telling people something that was real and not something that was packaged. And I don't think we should forget we spent the last few months of this campaign reading through the emails of somebody who is essentially exposing just how, blow by blow, Hillary Clinton comes to decide where is she going to be on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. What is she going to say? Instead of seeing, oh, this is somebody who believes very strongly that globalization is a force for good, or that she doesn't, and she thinks it's a force that's decimating the economy. I think people are rejecting that as well in this.
Which is, hats off to the Russian government, right? I mean, if we were all combing through the email chains amid all the different Trump campaign forces, trying to figure out how they came up with some of his policies and got him to say some of the things that he said, would also have been a blow to his apparent authenticity. That is something that didn't happen because WikiLeaks only went after Clinton.
On the other hand, though, it also simply told voters what they felt they already knew about Hillary Clinton.
Right. Telling voters something surprising is potentially even more fatal, right?
A break for us. When we come back, we're going to check in with Katie Tur at Trump headquarters. We have two campaigns in kind of a suspended animation, a holding pattern. One campaign, unlike the other, expecting to have some very good news when tonight is out. There is Trump headquarters, New York Hilton, 6th Avenue, not far from here, Midtown Manhattan. Clinton headquarters, a far, far different picture over at the Jacob Javits Convention Center on the west side of Manhattan. Our coverage will continue after a break. We are back, two very different evenings at two very different headquarters, and in a way, kind of mirror reflections of the ethos of those two campaigns. The Make America Great red hats have been distributed in the Hilton Ballroom in New York. The American flags behind the teleprompter with the Trump-Pence placard in front of the podium. On the west side of Manhattan, inside the glass-ceilinged Jacob Javits Convention Center, which almost bore the name Donald Trump, were it not for some last-minute construction maneuvering back in the day. There's the lectern. Again, this looks like night 3 at the Democratic Convention. Elaborate, huge staging. They were, candidly, expecting a victory celebration, down to what was once a plan for fireworks over the Hudson River, since canceled when cooler heads prevailed a few days back after that plan became public. Katie Tur is at Trump headquarters, having covered the Trump campaign for these 510 days, if I read your Twitter feed correctly today, Katie.
Yeah, I think I've done about 500 days with the Trump campaign. Donald Trump is said to be wanting to come out. He's itching to come out and address the crowd and give his speech. But he is, I'm told by a senior source, awaiting the allocation of 270 electoral votes. I just want to remind people a little bit about Donald Trump at this late hour and what the questions that still are outstanding about him. We still have not seen Donald Trump's taxes. There are still questions surrounding his business and how he would deal with the potential conflict of interest. He's talked about a blind trust going to his kids, but that technically is not really a blind trust. There's also still questions surrounding his relationship with Russia. These are all things that are unanswered at this time. And he also has not addressed directly, at least in recent months, what he would do about his Muslim ban. He's called it banning Muslims or extremists from territories or states where there is radical Islam. That number is quite high if you consider countries like France, which have had attacks on their soil, even attacks tax here in the U.S. It's unclear how that would happen. He has been talking about what he calls extreme vetting, even potentially a Muslim registration, which we haven't heard him completely rebuke. He also has said that he's going to build his wall. We all know this. But he said he would end Obamacare in his first 100 days in office by executive order. He has said he would rip up the Iran deal. These are things that are hard to do alone, but it's increasingly looking like he's going to have the House and potentially the Senate on his side. And if he makes a run with the rest of the states that are on the electoral map right now, you could essentially argue that he has a mandate. So how his first 100 days in office would shape up to be is certainly an open question. There's also the question of who would occupy his cabinet. In the last few days, those talks have been ongoing in more earnest than they had been before. Donald Trump refusing to take part in those talks out of superstition. But the names that we heard, and these are just very preliminary names, and obviously nothing is set in stone, and these names could be something that don't ever come to be, but Newt Gingrich as Secretary of State, Rudy Giuliani as Attorney General, Reince Priebus maybe as Chief of Staff. There's even rumors out there that Corey Lewandowski could head up the RNC. That would show how disconnected the Republican Party has come with its base and how they would want to completely change direction. Of course, all of this is very preliminary, and there's still a lot of work to be done. This transition had been head up by Governor Chris Christie, but he has sort of faded into the background in recent months. Now we're told that Jeff Sessions has taken a larger role. We're going to find out what they will be doing in this next 3 months. After all, Donald Trump hasn't been involved in these talks. You can hear the crowd behind me. They are obviously very excited for Donald Trump to take the stage. They are chanting right now, call it, call it. They're watching Fox News. They believe that this race is over. They just want to hear it.
Katie Tur, thank you. It'll take us years to discuss all that needs to be talked about coming out of tonight. We have a call on the Missouri Senate race. It's really attracted so much attention. The Democrats thought they could eke out a pickup this race, as I was saying earlier, on pure technical grounds. Probably gave us the craftiest ad of this campaign. The gentleman on the right, Jason Kander, the Democrat who has gone down in defeat, showed that he could assemble an AR-15 blindfolded, as countless members of the U.S. Armed Forces and law enforcement can do. But it was about guns as an issue in this race, and one ad does not a Senate race or a wave election make. And so it's a net hold for the Republicans. But Mr. Blunt, the veteran Republican from Missouri, always an interesting political state, is going back to the Senate. Steve Kornacki, having forged an alliance with his technology, is back at the board. Steve?
Me and this thing after the show.
Take it out back, yeah.
Okay, so we planted the seed earlier. We talked about, look, to be elected president, it's all about the Electoral College. Make that very clear. But we are also keeping track of the national popular vote, and I think this is at least worth pointing out. Let's put on the screen right now what the national popular vote is at this moment. You see Donald Trump with a lead there over Hillary Clinton of about 1.2 million votes. However, most of the vote that is outstanding on this map right now, it's heavily tilted toward the West Coast, more specifically toward the state of California. Look, this is an easy Clinton win, but here's the thing. California, obviously, it's gigantic. Only about a third of the vote is in California right now, and you see Hillary Clinton is already leading by 1.2 million votes. Now, Barack Obama's margin over California 4 years ago, and Clinton is on pace to match or maybe even exceed that margin. His margin was north of 3 million votes. So we are likely to tack on an additional 2 million votes to this margin for Hillary Clinton. Remember what I just showed you. Hillary Clinton's losing the national popular vote now by 1.2 million votes. Now, there are places on this map where Donald Trump's going to gain votes. We still have votes coming in Idaho, in Utah, in Alaska. These are smaller places We also have votes coming in Washington State, where Hillary Clinton's winning big, in Oregon, where she's winning big. So I said earlier I was planting a seed, now getting a little bit more serious about it. The last time we saw this was in the year 2000. Al Gore won the popular vote in the year 2000 by about 500,000 votes. And of course, in that Supreme Court decision, lost the state of Florida, lost the Electoral College, lost the presidency. Now, 16 years later, certainly as these numbers come in, the possibility is alive of Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote tonight, but losing the Electoral College and then losing the presidency.
If Hillary Clinton wins the popular vote tonight, even if she doesn't win the presidency, that will mean Democrats have won the popular vote in 6 out of the last 7 elections. It's the first time the Democratic Party has ever pulled that off in the history of the current 2 parties that we've got. The last time it was pulled off was by the Republican Party in the era of the formation of the Republican Party, like 1860 to 1888. If Clinton wins the popular vote, and those California numbers that Steve was just saying suggest that will be true, this will also be the second time in recent memory where a Democrat wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College.
So much talk tonight about the pollsters. Perhaps you may have heard this talk. Perhaps you may have participated in it. I am told Lawrence O'Donnell, in his Insider segment, has more than one pollster inside a room tonight. We're going to lock the doors until you get some answers, Lawrence.
We've got a couple here to confess, Brian. We have Bill McInturff, who is a Republican pollster. We have Fred Yang, who's a Democratic pollster. Bill, let's start with you. What did the polls get right? What did they get wrong?
Well, what they got right was the shape and the contour of this race. What they got wrong is the margins. So, for example, in all of our polling, we showed Trump ahead 25 points with white non-college, about what Romney got, except he won by 35 tonight. That's a net 10 points extra. They're 34% of the vote. That's 3.4% more of the whole electorate. Then the other change is that Trump did much better tonight with white women college plus. He lost them, but he lost them by single digits. In most of the public polling, he's been losing by literally 15 or 20 points. But it's a reminder, like these margins in rural America where he won by 62-34, that campaigns are about margins. And at the margin, because of margins, it's reshaping the map in the Midwest and reshaping the presidency.
But Fred, all of these polls carry a margin of error, usually about 3 points, which means if it says Trump's at 44, he might be as high as 47, he might be as low as 41. Right. So it's really a band of possibility. Are the outcomes we're seeing tonight within that band of predicted possibility?
I would agree, yes. I think tacking on to what Bill said, I think that in the battleground states, which because they're battleground states, they're 50-50 states, and today Mrs. Clinton was on the wrong end of 50-50. I think some of the margins that we saw in some of the earlier polling compared to 2012 just didn't bear out. She didn't do as well with Latinos. She didn't do as well with white women. She didn't do as well with millennials. She only won 18 to 29-year-olds by 17%. Barack Obama carried that group by 23%. So, I mean, look, I think there were a lot of polls, not every poll, a lot of polls converged to suggest that this would be a 2, 3, 4-point victory for Mrs. Clinton. As you pointed out, though, that's within the margin of error. And as Steve Kornacki pointed out, we could still have a situation in which she, quote-unquote, won the national poll, right? But because we have an electoral college system, she loses the election.
And, Bill, is there anything in the exit polls that you would see as the chief explainers of these outcomes?
I think the chief explains what I said, which is the margins by men and women who didn't graduate from college. These are extraordinary. He's in the mid-60s, and just to put this in perspective, he's winning today white non-college voters more than Ronald Reagan did in 1980 against Jimmy Carter. That's a huge deal.
Quick last word. Did the tools work? Is it within the margin of error, and therefore this is what the tools predicted?
I would argue that as we focus on the horse race aspect. Yeah. Even our last poll we conducted for NBC News and Wall Street Journal, there were a bunch of questions which suggested that this is an electorate wanting major change. I just think that we thought that Donald Trump was not that candidate to bring that change, and they've spoke tonight, and this country that wanted change
That's why we count the votes. Brian, back to you.
Can I, Lawrence, I'm going to ask you a question to put to those guys,
Sure.
which is what Rachel asked about a couple hours ago, which is a great question. If this was a change vote where people said throw the rascals out, how come they didn't throw the rascals out? We haven't heard tonight of any massive defeat of incumbents in the House or the Senate. So why just pick him, but keep the usual tongue together of the establishment?
Great question. Fred, you were just talking about that it indicated this was a change election. But what happened to all these incumbents who got reelected?
I'm sorry. Change never means change. It means change the party in power. The Democrats have been in power for 8 years. The president himself.
Why doesn't it mean change the senator in power?
It never does. And every time, every wave off your election, when they say we want change, I'm sorry, you know what it changes? The party in power. And despite President Obama's good standing tonight and his own approval, they've been there a long time. She offered more of the same, and people said no. I think the other thing to remember tonight is in most polling, there was 10 to 12% between third and fourth party vote or undecided. Well, third party vote dropped as always. They tipped Republican. And again, to Nate Silver's credit, when Silver kept saying, there's about a 30% chance this guy can win, because there's a lot more slide than there are in most polls. This is why he did a nice job representing all the time. I'm sorry, there's about a 30% chance we're going to see a President Trump. And tonight, you flip the coin 10 times, and we got one out of the three.
And how many late deciders were there? Because there was so much happening the last 11 days with regard to the FBI, where you had a big turn against Hillary in terms of what the news was, then a turn of relief back to her very recently, right before the election. Did that affect the voting, can you tell?
Fred.
Well, Chris, in the exit polls, 13% of the electorate in the exit polls said they decided in the last week or more recently. And among that 13%, they voted for Trump by 5 points, 47-42. And another 9% going to the third-party candidates. So I think, Mrs. Clinton's margin was predicated in some respects with the third and fourth-party candidates. And it's interesting, in the exit polls, groups where she did well with also had a higher share of the third and fourth party vote than groups she didn't do well with. And I think that just goes to the change argument. And the final thing I want to say about the change argument is there's another neat item in the exit poll. 17% of the American public said they wanted a president whose policies would be more liberal than Barack Obama's, 17%. And among that cohort, they voted for Hillary Clinton by big margins, but by only 70 to 23. In other words, 23% of voters who said they wanted a president whose policies more liberal than Donald Trump, but then Barack Obama, voted for Donald Trump.
And we had a very significant percentage of Trump voters saying in exit polls they don't think he has the right temperament to be president.
Well, today they had to make a choice. 18% of the folks said they didn't like either candidate. That's 3 times the normal amount. Trump won those people 49-29.
Of the ones who didn't want either candidate,
right?
Trump won them
49-29, which again to me represents what we're trying to say is I'm sorry. Here's an artsy line. De Tocqueville in Democracy in America said, Americans are the only people in the world who would build a dream house and move before the roof is finished. It's very hard to get a third term for one party. It doesn't happen very often. It's harder still in modern America.
Brian, back to you.
All right, Lawrence. Boy, so much there to think about. And, of course, all of us know these gentlemen, McInturf and Yang and Peter Hart. We've hung on every word they've said on so many conference calls leading up to this election. We knew something was coming. We knew something was brewing. Someone tonight called Donald Trump the shiny vehicle of change. This change was coming. They were going to hop on a car, get in it, and go.
The new car smell.
Yeah, that's right. That was 2 years ago.
That was Obama in 2014.
Hey, let's record keep on this Senate race in Pennsylvania. We've talked about Pennsylvania so much, and the incumbent is going back. Pat Toomey. Chris Matthews is shaking his head
because of all the predictions I got from the experts up there. Toomey, but I did get a good call from, and James knows this Pennsylvania very well. He's won many races up there. People like Rendell, the governor who works with us now, said that Hillary would have to win by 4 for her to get in. She would be the coattails to bring her in. But Pennsylvania, is in a mood right now. I can tell you. I talked to my brother. He said all these people showed up at the polls he'd never seen before in Montgomery County. And he said they're older than he'd ever seen at the polls. And they were all concerned, conservatives, about the Supreme Court. So Trump going in there on guns and the Supreme Court issue at the very end, we may not appreciate that in New York or in Washington, but up there, it taps something. And they said, I'll even put up with Trump, who I consider immoral and awful, to get my court protected.
It does, this is a really important moment for the Supreme Court, and the Republicans made a really radical decision when Antonin Scalia died that President Obama would not be allowed to even have his proposed nominee considered. I do think that it's now... I think that Roe versus Wade is at risk. I think that with Republicans in control of the House and the Senate and likely the White House, that means, as James said earlier, that Obamacare, they've got everything in place to repeal it. They've got everything in place they need to repeal Dodd-Frank. They've got everything in place they need to do whatever Trump wants to do on immigration, which I do not think will be immigration reform or anything that we've seen that looks like that. So they've got, I think Roe versus Wade has never been more at risk than it will be with President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence there lighting a fire under that issue, and a Supreme Court theirs to pave the way they want.
I have to interrupt here just to say Kristen Welker standing by at Clinton headquarters to talk to us. Kristen, am I correct that we're going to hear from John Podesta, assumed from the podium?
Well, here's what we know, Brian. He is headed over here. What's significant about that is that the Clinton campaign has largely gone dark for well over an hour now. Let me just take you through what happened. He was at the Peninsula Hotel here in New York watching returns with Secretary Clinton. He started to leave the hotel, encountered reporters who asked him for a reaction to the results so far. He didn't have any. And then they said, are you going over to the Javits Center? Yes, he is coming here. But he did not say whether or not he was going to actually speak. We anticipate we will hear from him. That would make sense. He is not, or he did not indicate that Secretary Clinton would be coming over with him. In fact, when he was asked directly, is Secretary Clinton coming to the Javits Center? He said, no, I am going. So this is significant again because there is movement from within the Clinton campaign headquarters, and we are going to, in some way, shape, or form, likely get some reaction from the chairman. Let me just set the scene here, Brian, inside the Javits Center. A number of people have left in tears. There is stunned disbelief as these results, as they come in. Earlier in the evening, they were looking for any sign that there was a potential path forward. When the results of Nevada, for example, came in, the crowd burst into cheers. But now, really, it's just silence as they listen to the music playing and await to hear what happens next. Brian.
Kristen Welker at Clinton headquarters. James Carville has joined us. I'm sorry?
No.
Maine. We have a projection. Maine. It is being projected by NBC News, will be won by Hillary Clinton when all the votes are cast. 3 out of the 4 electoral votes.
So that means we are not projecting the separate congressional district that...
No.
Okay.
Donald Trump gets 1.
Ah, okay.
So you'll note his total has grown by 1. What a fascinating and confusing and terrific.
So, to be clear,
yes.
To be clear, Maine, one of the electoral votes in Maine goes to Trump. The remaining electoral votes in Maine go to Hillary Clinton.
We're working on a new graphic that says she gets most of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. I was saying that James Carville has been kind enough to